Hello, welcome to Washington Talk. I'm Young-Kyo Kim. The 75th anniversary of the founding of the ruling Workers' Party comes during a difficult year for North Korea as the country contends with a broken economy. As the North Korean regime puts the focus on problems piling up at home, the support from China is much needed in sustaining North Korea's system. Meanwhile, the U.S. is seeking a united front to counter China's growing prowess, aiming to formalize the Quad security group. We'll discuss the regional environment surrounding the Korean peninsula. Joining us today is Bonnie Glaser. Ms. Glaser is a senior advisor for Asia and the director of the China Power Project and the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Joseph Detrani is also with us. Ambassador Detrani was former special envoy for the six-party talks and was director of National Counter-Proliferation Center. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Nice being here.
Thanks for having us.
Ahead of the celebrations of the 75th anniversary of the founding of the Workers' Party, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un called for an 80-day battle to funnel workers and resources to major projects by the end of the year. Ambassador Detrani, what is Kim Jong-un angling for?
His economy, he's focusing on the economy. He's having some economic issues. COVID-19 obviously has had impact in North Korea. They've closed the border with China. So there are economic imperatives there. Having said that, however, I think North Korea now is getting some assistance from China and Russia, whether it's ship-to-ship transfers or what have you. They're also very active with cyber crime, whether it's going after banks or cryptocurrency exchanges. So there's a lot of economic pressure on North Korea at this time. But my personal view is they're finding workarounds. They're finding ways of getting the resources they need, certainly to support their military programs, certainly the missile program, the nuclear program, and to support the elites in Pyongyang. But I think on a whole, the people of North Korea are hurting, and I think that's what the focus is now.
Mm-hmm. Ambassador, this kind of event, like an anniversary of the founding of the Workers' Party, what kind of significance does it have for the North Korean regime?
Well, I mean, this is an opportunity for them to not only come together domestically, internally, it's also an opportunity to message out to China, indeed the United States and South Korea, and other countries, Japan, to show that, their military program is still very robust. They continue with their nuclear and missile programs, and that the leadership, the key point here is the leadership is in control. The leadership has a vision. They have a strategy for moving forward. And I think this is an opportunity for them to propagate that line, that they're on a path.
As North Korea faces increasing hardship and isolation, the country needs backing from its main benefactor, China, more than ever. Meanwhile, the U.S. has been emphasizing the necessity of a NATO-like structure, namely the Quad, in the Indo-Pacific region to curb China's influence. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo had a meeting in Tokyo with foreign ministers from Japan, Australia, and India. Ms. Glaser, why is this the case?
There's growing concern about the PRC threat to democracies and to international institutions all over the world, as well as to the international order. And so Secretary Pompeo has been highlighting this issue with our allies and like-minded countries around the world. The Quad in particular is seen as presenting opportunities. There's been just a hardening of views toward China in all four of these countries. And there's a desire to capitalize that and see how we can work together to protect our democracies, to make our institutions safe and resilient, and also perhaps to push back against some of China's activities. So, institutionalizing cooperation can sometimes be an enabler, and I think that's what Secretary Pompeo is trying to do. I mean, that said, I think there's very little support in the region for a NATO-like structure in the Indo-Pacific. And I just don't think we're going to see that kind of a mechanism be realized. But there will be greater cooperation.
The U.S. has been stressing on working with democratic partners from Asia, including Taiwan and South Korea. But South Korea seems to be reluctant to join the Quad Plus. Ms. Glaser, how aligned is South Korea with the U.S. in this regard?
Well, I think that South Korea is not dissimilar from many countries in the region. They just don't want to be caught between the United States and China. This is particularly true of countries that are geographically situated very close to China. South Korea wants to have good relations with both China and the United States. Its economic relationship with China is extremely close and dependent on China. I think about 40% of South Korean exports go to China. And the South Koreans fear punitive measures from China, which of course already occurred when the decision was made to deploy the THAAD missile defense system. And China still has not completely reopened all of its markets in the cultural sphere, for example. Those remain relatively closed to South Korea. So there's a perception that Seoul needs China's help to deal with North Korea as well, and therefore should not align itself too closely with the United States. There are areas of friction between Seoul and Washington. The Quad Plus is one of them. The free and open Indo-Pacific is an area where the two sides don't completely see eye to eye. The inclusion of Huawei in networks. And the United States would like South Korea to be more active in the South China Sea. And that's an area that I think South Korea just attaches less priority to. So this is difficult for Seoul. You know, Beijing is pressuring South Korea to not work with the United States because they see this as an anti-China coalition. You know, I don't know whether the U.S. can actually persuade South Korea to do more. It will do what is in its own interest. And there is, to some extent, a divergence in the perceptions of their respective interests under these two governments. Whether that would change under different administrations in the United States and possibly in Seoul going forward, that remains a question.
Ambassador, how could the U.S. persuade South Korea to join its push for Quad Plus?
There's a lot of pressure on the Moon Jae-in government to balance that relationship between China and the United States. And China is very sensitive to the Quad, as was accurately stated. I totally agree. China sees this as an attempt to contain them, they're putting. I think they would put significant pressure on Seoul, and as Ms. Glaser indicated, what they did with the deployment of the THAAD, they have tools they can use, levers they can use with South Korea, and I don't think South Korea wants to be put in that position. And let me be blunt then. We have to be a little sensitive to not pushing South Korea to make a move they're not comfortable with. So this requires very skilled and very sensitive diplomacy.
Despite this kind of U.S.-China competition, the U.S. officials say that North Korea's denuclearization is the area where the U.S. can still cooperate with China. Ambassador, how has the cooperation come so far?
Well, look, we've cooperated. I mean, we had the 15th anniversary of the six-party talks just a few days ago, the 19th September. So, yeah, I mean, we've cooperated. China implemented the sanctions that the UN Security Council imposed on North Korea, certainly subsequent to 2016. I think it's fraying a bit right now because of the tension between the US and China. I think we have to be very candid about that. I don't think China is implementing the sanctions as forcefully as they had in the past. You know, this is also a message to both our countries. If we can't cooperate on something as obvious as this, then we have problems.
Ms. Glaser, can we hear your assessment on this issue as well?
In the first year of the Trump administration, that the United States really prioritized cooperation with China on North Korea, and there was progress made. And 2017 was a big year for imposing new sanctions, and China appeared to be enforcing them more strictly than ever before. At once, Trump launched the trade war with China and opted to engage directly with Kim Jong-un. I think that cooperation really weakened, and the U.S. Sort of global effort to put pressure on China has created an environment where Beijing now, as Ambassador Detrani said, correctly, sees the United States as, and it's more than just trying to contain China. I think they actually see the United States as trying to weaken the legitimacy of the Chinese Communist Party. So China really no longer sees it, I think, as in its interest to work with the United States on North Korea. I'm not convinced that this is something that can be easily changed under a new administration, but I think that if Vice President Biden is elected, there will be an effort to re-engage with China on how to advance denuclearization of North Korea.
Mm-hmm. South Korean President Moon Jae-in continues to call for the declaration of an end to the Korean War. This is in line with his earlier speech at the UN General Assembly at the end of the last month. Ambassador Detrani, why does President Moon maintain his stance even after the North Korean troops' killing of a South Korean civilian at the North Korean waters?
There is a sense that a declaration could build some confidence. It could show that the U.S., and certainly in this case, your question is in regards to South Korea, the Moon Jae-in government can show that they want to move forward with eventually a peace treaty to end the Korean War. I mean, this was the statement in Singapore in June of 2018. It was not only transformation of our relationship with North Korea and denuclearization, it was bringing peace to the Korean Peninsula, and that means a peace treaty. So the first step would be, in my view, a declaration.
But how will the U.S. respond to this at this moment?
I think we were almost there, to be honest with you, in 2018 and 2019, when we were moving into the summit in Hanoi. There was some sense that maybe a declaration would have been put on the table. I certainly would have supported it at that time. I think it would have been in a very positive mood. Obviously, Hanoi did not go in that direction. But that doesn't mean it can't be resurrected. And I think South Korea taking the initiative on this, I think would be proper, appropriate, and I think the U.S. should be supportive.
Meanwhile, it was belatedly confirmed that North Korea's former acting ambassador to Italy, Cho Sung-gil, sought asylum in South Korea and settled in Seoul in July last year. Ambassador, how will this news received by the North Korean regime and the North Korean elites?
Look, I think the message is clear. That there are people who disagree with the policy line. There's always going to be individuals who will question that. And frankly, that's positive, that people do see the world in different ways. I think, however, the consequences, if that's the right word, would be that they will be watching their embassies and their ambassadors and their diplomats that much closer. They're probably ensuring that families stay back in North Korea and not accompany the diplomats overseas. But I think this is indicative of a bigger issue. And the issue is, and I think Kim Jong-un, any leader, but certainly Kim Jong-un also, we're talking about North Korea, has to understand that you have to work hard and project a vision, a strategy and a vision for people to be supportive. Obviously, this gentleman was not supportive.
The 75th anniversary of the Workers' Party was supposed to be one of the biggest celebratory events for North Korea. However, grappling with domestic challenges, the regime still has a long way to go before convincing that it's leading its people to the right direction. Ms. Glaser and Ambassador Detrani, thank you both very much. I appreciate your time today.
Nice being here.
Thanks for having us.
That does it for this week's Washington Talk from Voice of America. Please join us again next week for more analysis.